Please give a warm round of applause for Aditya Ghosh, co-founder of Akasa. Aditya, please come on the dais.
Well, I mean, I think it starts off with realizing that this is a very front and center problem for us. Today, we keep looking at this statistic that out of global CO2 emissions, 3 to 4% is generated by aviation. What we don't quite talk about is that if we don't do something about it, it will jump to 22% in the next 15, 20 years. The second is that, but when we talk about responses, the global aviation industry has said that we want to get to net zero by 2050. Now, 2050 seems like a long period away. To put it in perspective, it is only 10,000 days away. So in 10,000 days, global aviation industry has to get to net zero. And we have another challenge on our hands that technology is changing, passenger numbers are changing. So all the things that we are terribly excited about, which is growth in the market. The challenge is how do we decouple it from growing? How do we decouple it from growing, emission standards?
Right.
Now, like you said, Europe and North America seem to kind of be talking about it a lot. But if the big growth spurt is going to actually happen in this part of the world, then the response has to be that much faster here. And I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I also think India can play a very, very important role.
Yeah.
And there is a huge opportunity for Indian businesses as well, because of our abundance of feedstock, because of our lower cost of production, etc. So I think there is a if I'm honest, is our response adequate?
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Have we started the journey? Yes. Do we need to pace up that journey? I think yes. My personal view on this is that in a country like India, the airlines and airports, I mean, I'm saying all stakeholders in the travel space will be pushed to take sustainability very seriously. And the reason for that is we as a country have made, the Prime Minister has made a commitment by 2070. We've as a country said that 50% of all new power generation capacity has to be non-fossil fuel by 2030. Green hydrogen mission is a reality. So I feel that it'll be very difficult for the travel business to stay divorced from what the overall direction is. Now, having said that, it's also a reality that, let's say, sustainable aviation fuel is 200% to 500% more expensive than traditional jet fuel. When you look at 2030, the World Economic Forum, where Boeing has participated in it, CEW has participated in it, I'm a YGL of World Economic Forum, there is a target that by 2030, about 100 million passengers, we want to carry 100 million passengers in India on at least 10% blended SAF. Now that's a very lofty target, but what that translates to in real numbers is there is a gap of $350 million between what it would cost as with traditional jet fuel versus what it would cost with 10% blended SAF. Now, we have to then start thinking of these challenges, and you can't suddenly impose a target on the aviation business and say this go make it happen in the next 3,000 days.
Right.
So how is that viability gap funding going to happen? Is it going to happen from government? Is it going to happen from private participation? Is it going to happen from a combination of both? And is it going to happen from customers paying for it?
Yes.
So I think these are real challenges that one has to kind of address to make it happen. We, I think, have a big opportunity. Today, India produces about 166 million tons of feedstock annually, which is enough to create 22 million tons of SAF annually. So, therefore, we as a country have a massive opportunity to plug into the global supply chain as a country which will produce sustainable aviation fuel, which has lower cost of feedstock in abundant levels. And I think while we may be lagging behind in certain areas as an industry, not just
Right.
India, but I think India can play a very leading, significant role in
right.
trying to solve it for the world. On gender parity, and it is beyond just women, but it is also all non-binary gender. Right? I think we don't realize how large that population is in terms of the unaddressed and the ignored. And it's a tragedy that it's almost like an invisible thing, like, it's to see through people. But then again, if we anchor it in economic opportunity, today our female labor force participation is 25%. By the way, it used to be 17% 5 years ago. But the tragedy is, it is 48% globally. But if we could somehow magically bridge the gender parity gap, it means that we can see, estimates are that we will see as a country a 13-fold increase in our GDP growth. Right? So this is something that is, it's like a low-hanging fruit, but one has to address it. The second is that it starts off all the way from education to policy to a different way of welcoming diverse gender participation into the workforce, and then so on and so on. In the airline business, when I first took on my previous CEO role, 2008, 15 years ago, I think it was about 10 to 12% was the women participation in the workforce in the airline business. Today at Akasa, we are 37%. 1/3 of our leadership team is women. To get to that 50-50 is that journey. But then it's all across. If you look at how many companies have one woman board member, you'll see quite a few.
In spite of that they have to be compliant to.
Exactly. But if you see how many companies in India have a woman chairperson, you'll probably be able to count them on your hand.
Do we have the right framework in place to achieve the desired outcome?
Well, I think look, again, I think India has led the way. Today, the number of pilots, women pilots in India is about 12.5%. Nowhere close to 50, but it is more than double the global average. The global average is less than 5%.
Of late, it's picking up more.
And if you look at first officers and junior first officers, you'll see a much higher ratio. And therefore, that basically means that we have the opportunity of catching up with that gap.
Yeah.
Well, the honest answer is, I think whatever is long term gets sacrificed at the altar of what is urgent and the next fire of the day. So I've often noticed that leaders will not spend enough time. It's easy to say people are an asset, we are a people company, we are a people business. And then you ask a CEO, how much time do you spend on people? It'll be like some 5%, right? And then it'll be the training head's problem, and it'll be the L&D head's problem, and it'll be the HR head's problem. And I always say that, look, if this is going to be one of your single biggest assets, then where is the investment that is coming in beyond the money? And so probably the answer to that is lies. Yeah, so Kapil, I always say we need an army of leaders in our organization. Because unlike, let's say, if I was in a large company which was selling buses, chances are that when the most important customer of my bus company comes in and says, I want to buy 5,000 buses, the CEO will be there. When the most important customer of Akasa walks in through the door, they don't know who Aditya or Vinay is, and they don't care. That person standing in the aisle, the lead flight attendant or the check-in staff or the captain, is the senior most person at Akasa that they will ever meet. So how do we make sure that all those frontline people are equipped to be frontline leaders? And that comes from the fact that it does not help by just sending your CXOs to Harvard, but actually creating leadership and learning interventions all across, and truly believing that in the airline business, all of us are equals. We just have different roles to play.